joining us. I am Rose Bishop. Thanks for joining us again this week as we take a look at the week's news. And what a week it has been. First up, the Queen's birthday has just passed and the annual tradition of distributing Order of Australia awards has happened once again. And among the recipients this year was a professor who advocates for sex with robots, who also recently ran as a candidate for Fraser Anning's far-right micro-party at the May election, and who looks like he definitely just finished doing something he shouldn't talk about in polite company. It's Adrian Jock. I haven't looked into what he was awarded the order for, but I can only assume it was for fixing a bung chip in the brain of the Queen's own sex robot, Prince Philip. Hopefully he also cleared out the racism and propensity for car accident glitches right up while he was in there. The Queen's birthday is actually the perfect occasion for awarding medals to sex robot enthusiasts, as the British also share Jock's love of having sex with cold, emotionless beings, i.e. other British people. But anyway, back to the Fraser Anning stuff. So Jock was once a member of the Palmer United Party, presumably because they had the biggest and sexiest robots, but after he was told to dumb down his policies, he quit to join the Conservative National Party instead. That is, of course, the party of Fraser Anning, a man who dropped the phrase final solution in his maiden speech in Parliament. I mean, I didn't think they got any dumber than that, but I guess as a far-right party, the Conservative National Party will need someone who can crush the skulls of its enemies underfoot, but at night has a gentle touch. A Schwarzenegger in the streets, but a Lady Terminator in the sheets, if you will. And at least with robots, you know exactly where they were manufactured. I mean, there'll be no concerns with Section 44 when it comes to Anning's squad of killbots. They'll all have the Made in Australia seal of approval. Now, in drastic rebranding news, the US Department of Energy has released a press statement about the future of natural gases in America and across the world, which reads, increasing export capacity is critical to spreading freedom gas throughout the world. That's right, they're calling it freedom gas. Here are some other energy rebrandings we can expect from the Trump administration. Windmills will henceforth be known as Dutch terror turbines. Solar power will be known as unstable fireball energy, and geothermal power will now be referred to as, we're pretty sure Satan's sending this straight up from hell, so stay well away. Speaking of rebrandings, here's one closer to home. The Coalition has moved to rebrand the Department of Human Services by renaming it Services Australia. That's right, we're only a few weeks into his new term and ScoMo is already sucking the humanity right out of his departments like he's a goddamn dementor. Given the desperate state of Newstart, which hasn't seen an increase in real terms since 1994, and which has literally driven people to homelessness and suicide with their incorrectly calculated robo-debts, this move seems pretty on brand. No doubt Services Australia will look to roll out new names for their current benefits too, just to make the more affluent and privileged really want to shit on the disadvantaged. For example, Newstart could be renamed Bludgebucks, and you could access via the I'm only poor because I'm not trying hard enough portal. Since government departments are looking to rebrand, we thought maybe we'd help with a new logo for Centrelink if they wish to use it. It's much like the old logo, except this one more closely represents the puckered asshole of many Australians attempting to deal with the department. Now on to the American president and the man who launched 1,000 arts projects. Donald Trump has recently finished up a visit to England where he did a lot of things, including an appearance on Good Morning Britain with controversial morning show host Piers Morgan. During the interview, he dropped this gem.
So do you personally believe in climate change?
I believe that there's a change in weather, and I think it changes both ways.
There we go. Just had to play the clip so you could see that for yourself. Now, we here at The Leak have spent a long time trying to figure out exactly what he meant by that, and while I appreciate that trying to make sense of Trump's statements is a task that even Alan Turing would struggle with, we think we have it. So he says climate change goes both ways, which I assume just means that the temperature goes up, the regulations go down, and here we stay in the middle rotating like a sad pig on a spit. Simple. He then went on to proclaim,
don't forget, it used to be called global warming. That wasn't working. Then it was called climate change. Now it's actually called extreme weather.
There we go. So he thinks we should rebrand climate change as extreme weather rather than actually acknowledging that extreme weather is a result of climate change. That's very on brand for Trump. He never was one for acknowledging blame.
A few days ago, I called the fake news the enemy of the people, and they are. They are the enemy of the people.
Very humble. And in local news, the Australian minimum wage is set to rise 3% to $740.80 a week. The Australian Chamber of Commerce and Industry actually fought for a smaller increase of 1.8%, arguing that the viability of small businesses could be at risk. But I mean, buddy, if your business can't handle an extra 56 cents an hour, what else are you worried about? That the one-ply toilet paper in your bathroom is still thick enough that your finger doesn't bust through mid-wipe? I mean, are you going to save 50 cents a roll by cutting down on that too? Just pay your wage slaves their extra 3% and shush, or I will sick Karl Marx's ghost on you and he will punch you right in your means of production. And finally, in climate change news, a recent report has claimed that it's likely that human civilization will completely collapse by the year 2050 due to scarcity of food and water, rising sea levels and mass human migration caused, of course, by climate change. The report does claim, though, that forward-thinking leadership prioritising difficult long-term energy and waste strategies over propping up a dying coal industry could prevent this from happening. So, in other words, so long suckers, we're toast. Now, I've run the numbers and it turns out that 2050 is almost bang on the year that I'll become eligible for an aged pension, thus being able to retire from full-time work. So the news of our imminent demise has hit me particularly hard. I mean, I can just see it on a novelty t-shirt as a fun slogan. I went to work for 40 years and all I got was this lousy climate apocalypse. So yeah, I'm pretty upset that I'm stuck in the slow death spiral of our planet and it wasn't even my fault. I mean, a lot of people my age are. But I've been trying to put aside my pesky emotions and focus on what really matters in this situation. What do the baby boomers think? After all, they did a whole lot to create this mess and they aren't going to live long enough to suffer the consequences, but they still make up the bulk of our government and own pretty much all of our media, so we still have to listen to their opinions much more than we'd like to, which is to say, at all. So do you reckon the boomers feel bad that the world's going to end before I get time to take a really slow caravan trip around Australia? Of course they don't. Because I'm a millennial, and according to boomers, it's so typical of my generation to make this whole thing about me. Classic entitled millennials, always wanting our safe spaces and our participation trophies and our breathable air. But if we're such a weak, self-involved generation, as they say, I mean, surely we'll immediately wilt under the pressure of a total societal collapse, right? I'd actually argue no. I think millennials might actually be the most battle-ready generation since the Industrial Revolution. I mean, take housing. Boomers destroyed the property market so badly that most of us can't afford to live alone, let alone own property. But what does that mean? It means share houses. And I'll tell you what, nothing has prepared me better for the imminent total collapse of society than living in share houses for the last 15 years. They are a lawless free-for-all where no yogurt is safe in the communal fridge and no surface is ever clean. Not to mention, with the price of housing what it is, the best most of us can afford is a cramped room in a house that's drafty and cold in winter and boiling hot in summer and riddled with black mould. But that just means that our generation is like cockroaches. We've evolved to withstand some pretty extreme conditions and it's very hard to kill us with a shoe. So when the end times come, we'll just scurry out into our new Mad Max existence without much adjustment needed. I mean, after years of choking down rage over no one else ever taking the bloody bins out, I've got enough rage saved up to happily murder someone for a tin of beans in a post-apocalyptic hellscape a few decades from now. Also, years of running from Mikey inspectors has made me quick and nimble, which will be ideal when I'm trying to evade bandits and cannibals. And don't even get me started on millennial food. I mean, you all laughed at the kombucha trend, but all my friends are making kombucha in their kitchens at home right now. And what is kombucha but a delicious, nourishing tea that you make out of a jar of fungus? Yeah, millennials are going to be just fine. So suck it, baby boomers. You thought you broke us with your negative gearing and slow chipping away of workers' rights and welfare protections, but you only made us stronger. See you in hell, and see you after the break. Welcome back. I have calmed down in the break and I am ready to talk about Australia's second trashiest awards night, after the Brownlows obviously. It's back and I am talking about the Logies, the telly awards voted for by Australia's most discerning tastemakers, the readers of TV Week. This year's Logie nominees were announced recently, and whilst the awards are traditionally dominated by commercial TV, this year the ABC put in a surprisingly strong showing with several ABC stars and shows up for awards. This is particularly impressive given that coalition governments have been slowly chipping away at the ABC's funding for years now, so it's kind of fighting with one hand tied behind its back. Here to discuss this tonight is our entertainment consultant, Elyce Phillips.
Bazinga, Rose.
Sorry?
Oh, it's ratings for thanks for having me.
Okay, well, Elyce, I understand that you're actually a high-level executive at the ABC. You must be delighted with all the nominations that Auntie got this year.
We weren't expecting it, that's for sure.
I mean, obviously as a prestigious public broadcaster, you're not too concerned with the Logies, though.
Oh, wash your mouth out. The Logies are as much of a cultural institution as Bert Newton's enormous gleaming forehead.
I mean, I guess, but at least wouldn't you say that the success of the ABC at the Logies this year makes a good argument for restoring funding to the broadcaster so it can continue to make content that's both artistically valuable and crowd-pleasing?
No, absolutely not. The opposite, if anything.
Wow, sorry, that was meant to be a rhetorical question. What do you mean by the opposite?
Well, the coalition has continued to squeeze every dollar it can out of the ABC's budget into other, more important coal mines. But do you know what squeezing creates? Pressure. And do you know what pressure creates? Diamonds. And also nail-biting MasterChef challenges.
Okay, so you're just saying that the ABC will be fine despite the pressure of funding cuts?
Oh, no, I'm saying that the coalition's funding cuts don't go far enough. We should defund the ABC entirely.
Wait, don't you work for the ABC?
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I work for the public broadcaster, which means that I'm here to give the public what they want. And the public clearly doesn't want to watch prestige drama about sad, poor people. No, they want to watch middle-class people with too much hair, renovating properties and ruining their marriages live on TV.
But I mean, is that really what's best for us as a nation? I mean, classic shows on the ABC have formed a really important part of our national identity and they've helped to shape our culture, and surely that requires sometimes going beyond what people want and, I don't know, sort of giving them what they need.
It's absolute rubbish. I mean, the ABC is the product and the viewers are the consumers. If the consumers want trash, we should just lead them right to the nearest dumpster and let them roll around in the filth inside. I mean, look, Costa from Gardening Australia, he's up for the Gold Logie this year, right? But where's the buzz? We ought to spice up Gardening Australia, make Costa go full survivor, make him spend weeks living in his own garden, eating bugs and lizards and finding his neighbour for food. Or we could get Annabelle Crabb to take a lesson from Gordon Ramsay and say a lot more fuck words to politicians on kitchen cabinets.
You wouldn't, not Annabelle.
Oh, I mean, ideally we'd just cut funding entirely and send the ABC's top 15 presenters to an island or maybe like a sexy resort, and we can set them up with some cameras and just see what they get up to. If they end up porking, great. If they end up in some sort of Lord of the Flies situation and Sarah Ferguson does Tony Jones in with a stonking great rock to the head, that's even better. If Costa grinds up all the others and uses their blood and bones to fertilise the flora of the island, then bellissimo. Well, that's good television.
So you're saying you want the ABC to be more like reality TV? I mean, I don't want to sound like a culture snob, but I'm not on board with that. Reality TV, all the challenges and drama are so contrived.
Look, Rose, you're in luck because traditional reality TV, it's passé anyway. You know, if I get my way, we'll eventually just go the Gogglebox route. You know, Gogglebox has won multiple Logies. So what I reckon is we just delete every program off the ABC hard drive except for season 1 of Sea Change, and then we'll film some plebs watching that show and talking about it and flicking the bean to Diver Dan or wherever it is that those plebs do, and then we'll film more plebs watching that and more plebs watching that and so on and so forth, like a human centipede of entertainment, if you will, just feasting on an ever-replenishing pile of televisual effluent.
God, you wouldn't, would you?
While I'm at it, I'm going to trim all the corners off Four Corners. People don't want a pointy, difficult program. They want smooth, easy-to-swallow orbs.
Not Four Corners.
Yeah, the Logies in their current state are starting to look a lot more appealing, aren't they, Rose?
Yeah, I mean, the Logies actually aren't looking so bad all of a sudden.
I tell you what, I am actually super pumped to go this year. Did you know they're bringing out Young Sheldon from Young Sheldon? I'm going to ask him to replace Barry Cassidy on Insiders.
I will burn this studio to the ground if you do not leave now.
That would be great TV.
Elyce Phillips, everyone, get out. Get out. You're banned. You are banned from here. Oh boy. I'm sorry about that, ABC fans. So let's move on to some Royal Commission news now. Over the last few years, Australia has seen Royal Commissions into some incredibly important issues, including institutional responses to child sexual abuse, Indigenous deaths in custody and misconduct in banking. Many of these Royal Commissions, however, have faced criticism due to the lack of any actual outcomes, like prosecutions for crimes, new legislation or effective changes to institutions. For example, many people have pointed out that one Royal Commission's recommendations included closing the notoriously violent hotbed of institutional abuse that is the Dondale Youth Detention Centre, which to date has still not been done despite inmates' best efforts to speed the process along. Others have also claimed that the lack of prosecutions of those identified in the Banking Royal Commission is further proof that Royal Commissions are toothless. So here to discuss this with us is the government's Royal Commissions advisor, Scoot Lambrock, attorney at large. Wait, shouldn't that be attorney at law?
No, Rose, I'm an attorney at large, a veritable gunslinger in the wild west of the legal landscape. And that's right, I would advise the government on every Royal Commission. I think we'll all agree there have been infallible processes to identify wrongdoing and move appropriate legislation forward. So thanks for having me.
No, sorry, hold on there, Scoot. Our team do have a few concerns about the uses of Royal Commissions as a way to resolve these problems.
Okay, well, I don't know what possible problem you can have, but sure, let's, as they say, draw.
No, Scoot, I don't draw, I only have civil debate.
Well done.
Scoot, here's what's wrong with your approach. There's no real accountability with Royal Commissions. For example, there's no opportunity for review of the processes behind them or of their findings. And so how can we possibly know that they're working the way they should? The government does less critical analysis of the utility of Royal Commissions than I do into why Netflix keeps recommending me tidying up with Marie Kondo, which I definitely don't already watch several times a week from underneath a nest of dirty laundry and pizza boxes that I definitely don't sleep in. My house is clean, Netflix.
Okay, well, let me give you a little insight into my philosophy of government, okay? If you've got an ish, call a Royal Commish.
But surely just because something rhymes doesn't mean it's a sound basis for policy.
Well, that's a ridiculous thing to say. If it rhymes, it is fine.
It barely rhymes. And I mean, you're just pushing Royal Commissions as a last resort for when governments are too spineless to actually approach an issue without bias or can't get their crap together to tackle an issue and just want to outsource the problem. I mean, at least in the UK, recommendations from Royal Commissions are actually enforced in legislation. Over here, a commission can only give recommendations that the government is perfectly free to just decide not to act on. They end up being more ineffective than my dry cleaner when I wanted them to get red wine stains out of my sexy shirt. And let me tell you, that was very ineffective, mainly because I spilled a whole bottle on it, but still.
Okay, well, first, please never accuse the government of being ineffective. That is ludicrous. It only took me 6 weeks and 8 forms to order this pen, all right? Now, second, what's the problem with recommendations? If the government chose to do nothing without a Royal Commission, they would face intense criticism. I much prefer the notion that they gather the maximum available evidence before them, leaving no nook or cranny unexplored, and then choose to do nothing. And if you call that ineffective, well, I'd prefer you look at it as informed restraint.
Or say cowardice, or a lack of will to hold people to account, or a process of elites working in cahoots to ensure that they all retain their own centres of power, maybe.
Okay, well, you say tomato, I say get me a QC and we'll figure this one out over an extended period of time.
But isn't it the case that governments are often just using Royal Commissions as a way to avoid making tough decisions, hoping that just by initiating one, people will feel that an issue's been dealt with? I mean, even if no one's held to an account and there are no actual policy outcomes. Kind of like when all the other leak correspondents at the leak headquarters kept stealing each other's lunch, so I put a sign up that says, please don't steal lunch, but then someone took the sign down. And that's it, that's the end of the anecdote, which is exactly the problem.
Okay, Rose, it seems I cannot sway you. But if that's how you really feel, then I think I have just a solution.
Please don't say...
A Royal Commission into Royal Commissions. What better way to deal with the flaws of Royal Commissions than a Royal Commission designed to uncover these flaws?
But wouldn't a Royal Commission into Royal Commissions just replicate the issues that already exist with Royal Commissions, making it impossible to identify what the actual problems are?
Okay, well, sure, Rose. Hypothetically, this Royal Commission may just pile on the same problems we've had with Royal Commissions in the past, creating a kind of recursion of flaws that replicate themselves so intensely and in such a complex and interconnected way that it would become impossible to discern what the original issue was that came about. But at the same time, such a Royal Commission could give us a much needed breathing room on the question of Royal Commissions.
So this Royal Commission would only exist to delay any decision making?
During which time we could launch any other number of Royal Commissions into the pressing problems of the day, pending the outcome of the Royal Commission into Royal Commissions, which could be referred to as a Super Royal Commission or an Royal Commission.
There's no way this is an effective way to identify and address the problems we're trying to deal with, though.
Of course not. If we were serious, we'd probably look into passing legislation.
Or fund some scientific research into growing the government a backbone, maybe.
You're right. We should have a Royal Commission into the scientific method itself.
Why do I keep having you back on here? Scoot Lambrock, everybody, and we will be right back after this. Welcome back. So we bring you this next story from our new raid-proof bunker at our undisclosed location at the RMI TV studios in the heart of the CBD. Now, we at The Leak have recently gone into hiding because of this week's unprecedented raids on journalists.
Now, journalists, MPs and whistleblowers face possible jail time in an increasingly bitter battle over press freedom in Australia.
Scary. I mean, not that we consider ourselves actual journalists here at The Leak, but as the acting AFP commissioner said,
no sector of the community should be immune for this type of activity.
And federal raids have even targeted the home of News Corp journalist Annika Smethurst. There she is. And we would also hardly call most of what News Corp does journalism, so we feel like we are running a risk. In a statement, the BBC said this police raid against our partners at ABC is an attack on press freedom, which we at the BBC find deeply troubling. And we all know that deeply troubling is British slang for fucking horrifying. It just doesn't carry as well in the BBC's received pronunciation. So how does Monster for Home Affairs Peter Dutton feel on the matter?
The Federal Police have an obligation to investigate that matter if it's been referred to them, and they've got equally an obligation under law to conduct their inquiries independently. Nobody would accept...
Oh, sorry, cut you off there, Dutton. You were defending horrors.
Nobody would accept me as minister or Elbow as minister directing how an investigation should take place or who should be raided or who should be subject to inquiry.
And Peter Dutton's right, of course. We wouldn't want anyone free to abuse a position of power.
For more than a week, Peter Dutton's been fending off claims he misused ministerial powers in saving 2 European nannies from deportation.
But I mean, that reporter was fine, right? Yeah, he was fine. I mean, you know, obviously didn't keep his job, but at least he wasn't fired. He simply didn't have his contract renewed. I mean, it could happen to anyone. And anyway, that was years ago. We now have a fancy new set of whistleblower laws, so we're probably fine. Maybe. Possibly. Except for all the raids. Yeah, okay, we're probably screwed. Joining us here in the bunker and here to explain how we got into this mess in the first place, we've got our residential law expert now, Justice Vidya Rajan.
Hello, Rose. Yes, it is I, Justice Rajan, gavel, gavel, etc.
So, Justice Rajan, you specialise in constitutional law. That sounds important. How did you get into that?
Yes, correct. I am important. See, Rose, it all began when I got a half-decent mark on the first half of a constitutional law exam during my half-finished law degree. From then on, there was really no stopping me. I went on to watch The Castle not once or twice, but 3 times. And also, I bought this wig.
It's a very impressive wig. It does make me immediately trust what you're going to say. So tell us, why is Australia so bad at free speech? It's like the law hates us.
Yes, Rose, that's because it does. More specifically, the Constitution hates you. The Constitution was made by a bunch of dudes around Federation, and in classic Australian fashion, you could say that the key feature of the Australian Constitution is how much it doesn't like to actually spell out or commit to or decisively include things. As a document, it's basically a giant yeah, nah, yeah, maybe.
I mean, that is our national motto, I guess.
The upshot of that, though, is that stuff like freedom from racial discrimination, freedom of movement, only courts being able to hand down criminal sentences, and of course the right to free speech, aren't actually expressed in the document. They have to be implied in.
Okay. So the Australian Constitution is basically like my Uncle Steve, who always leaves it up to my Aunt Ethel to somehow read between the lines of his grunts and work out what he actually wants. Their marriage is terrible.
Pretty much. And all that implication has been up to the court so far. Look, what courts have had to do basically is look at the structure of the Constitution and say things like, well, it definitely says we need to have elections, but if we need to have elections, that means people need to be able to freely talk about politics and their opinions about politics, even One Nation voters. So in that way, it's implied that the Constitution is saying it wants us to talk about things freely. So it's kind of like having a right to free speech, except not actually.
Okay. So what I'm hearing is that the Constitution's a bloke who can't communicate and needs to start going to men's shed. I'm starting to see the problem.
Yep, and just like blokes not expressing things and keeping them to themselves, the lack of express rights in our Constitution is threatening the peaceful fabric of our everyday lives.
I mean, this sounds like a systemic problem that's very hard to solve.
It is. See, when you have to imply rights into a document, it makes those rights pretty shady and limited because they're always dependent on our understanding of other bits of the document. To get any clarity, people have to take a case before the court, and that's a lengthy process and also one that's open to a lot of changing interpretation. Meanwhile, the government can just keep passing harmful laws.
And I mean, that's what's happened here, right? Like over the last few years, the federal government's passed several bits of legislation that increase their powers to investigate and tamper with journalists and their sources in the name of national security. I mean, would that have been possible if we had an express right to free speech?
It would have been a lot harder and attracted immediate scrutiny and challenge. But now, seeing as there isn't such a right, we're probably going to have to wait for the courts to say if these actions are legal or not. Meanwhile, fucking shit can happen.
That's true. So a Bill of Rights is kind of like a preventative health measure, like a condom or the Medicare therapy sessions that we wish Uncle Steve had accessed before his meltdown. Aunt Ethel is very tired.
Exactly, Rose. And if we don't want to be Aunt Ethel, God rest her soul.
I mean, she's not actually dead, maybe emotionally, but not...
Yes, R.I.P. Aunt Ethel. We need to seriously start looking at agitating for a Bill of Rights.
AFP!
Yep.
Oh, God,
no.
I forgot these two work for the federal police.
Oh, gavel, gavel, gavel!
My God.
I knew there was a leak.
It's just the name, Scoot.
Yeah.
Look, it looks like they found us. We're going to have to cut this short. We're being arrested. Look, please thank all my guests and join us again next week, assuming they let us come back for another episode of The Leak.
I can't believe we let you finish that monologue.
Boy, this always happens.